Is Brad Lambert an NHL player of the season? Is Elias Salomonsson? And how long are they going to stick with Connor Scheifele Vilardi as the top line? We talked about that and much more on episode 101 of the Level Flight podcast this week with guest appearance from Murat.
Okay, we good to go?
Always good to go.
I'm just chilling at Canada Life Center.
That's the hard-hitting analysis you listen to the Level Flight podcast for.
Here we go.
Jets are a brisket team, low and slow for the first two periods, and boom, an explosion of flavor in the last few minutes of the third.
Doing all right. Better if my internet would work.
Elias.
This is comedy.
I'm Brian. I'm joined by Connor.
Hello.
And Elliot.
Hey, hey.
Wow, that was fun.
You're listening to the Level Flight podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome into the 101st episode of the Level Flight podcast. I have to get used to that extra digit. You know, today, if you're already watching on video, you would have noticed already, we are joined today by Murat of The Athletic. We're going to get into a bunch of stuff about training camp, about the season. But before we do that, Murat, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. And I got to admit, like, your production on the teaser trailer intro to the show, it's pump up music. I'm in. I'm fired up.
Perfect. Yeah, I realized that you haven't been on since the end of last season. So we brought a few new things in. So you've got the full production value now that get to really, roll into things. And, the intro video, it shows a lot of our little low lights, but in a very pump up way. So
yeah, LFP's gone so professional. This is great.
Oh, thank you. But let's get into things now. Last night, Jets with a big 5-2 win in their final home preseason date. They managed to take down the Flames before they play them again on Friday and what's going to be the final preseason game. What sort of just stood out to you from last night's game, with everything that sort of transpired offensively, anything that stood out to you?
I mean, the big, enormous positive would have to be the power play. It stood out since we've watched them start practicing it at camp. Their entries are more thought through. They do drills that actually include the entry, which is relatively new to the Winnipeg Jets. The amount of movement, the amount of interchange, all of those different things. And you saw it all on Nikolai Ehlers' goal, where he's actually moving into position as he gets that pass from Gabe Vilardi. And if you catch a replay of that, you can notice him, the way that he moves into that spot. If you look at the defenseman that he sort of sneaks in behind, he arrives sort of over his shoulder, and it's hard for him to track Ehlers on his way into that spot. I like that. A little bit of that is just reading the moment, and a lot is also that the Jets have permission to move around quite a bit more this year. I think the power play is a real bright spot. I also spent, I'm going to say, 50 minutes of the game waiting for the players on the bubble to make an impact that says, like, hey, we can do what we do against, AHL level / tweener / NHL level professionals. And I love the play Brad Lambert makes on the pass that sets up Simon Lundmark's goal. And there are nice moments from him. There's some good exit and entry work from Nikita Chibrikov. Lundmark, obviously great shot. Elias Salomonsson continuing to improve step by step. But I have to say one of my takeaways is those players you might think of as maybes. I didn't see something that said that moves me from a maybe into a they're making the team right here and now.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was going to roll into. And especially with the forward group, you had both Lambert and Chibrikov, who kind of came into the camp this year with the ability to maybe turn some heads, maybe, shock everyone and make the roster. After, as you said, it took them a little while to really, get anything going and not really stand out. Would you say that it seems way more than likely now that they're starting the season with the Manitoba Moose?
That's how I see it. We're going to have to wait and see a little bit. I've just come from practice, as you know, and Scott Arniel says that they got good news on Gustafsson. He also referred to Gustafsson as day-to-day with the lower body injury that he picked up last night. He was hit, I think, near the penalty box, and that's when that happened. And Jared Anderson-Dolan blocked a shot, and he's got some swelling that's built up around that. It sounds also like a short-term injury, and I'm not sure Anderson Dolan was going to make the team one way or another. But if Gustafsson misses any time, some opportunity opens up that we weren't necessarily aware of, or even can be sure of right here as we speak. So they'll watch and see that. But I think on a healthy Jets group of forwards, I didn't see the thing that's going to displace one of Winnipeg's veterans in place of the waivers exempt Lambert or Chibrikov. You can take a different philosophy to it. You can say, we'll get them their developmental reps at the NHL level. That would have to come at the expense of players who have outperformed them, and that would be, for the long-term benefits of it. Your question was, where are they going to start? And I see it as happening in the AHL.
And I guess the same case can be said for the defensive group, where after both Ville Heinola and Logan Stanley go down with injuries that aren't necessarily short-term, there was a spot there to be had. And there's, I would say, ultimately three players that were kind of considered off the top of people's heads, and that was Hayden Fleury, Dylan Coghlan, and Salomonsson. Do you think that Elias Salomonsson has done enough to warrant this last game to be that sort of audition, or does he also look like a sort of start with the Manitoba Moose situation?
I think he definitely warrants another exhibition game, or at least in my opinion he does. He's played a bunch of them, to be clear. The thing that the reason why with him I'd be more curious is that, as opposed to the Lamberts and Chibrikovs, who maybe stood out more and more early and have given up ground as the quality of competition has gone up, I think Salomonsson started out kind of awkwardly, and as the pace of play has picked up, as the quality of reads have picked up, and also his familiarity with North American ice. Remember, he's here for the first full season of his career, so there's going to be different reads and different shapes to the reads, different angles, different timing. I think that is all coming along on a day-by-day, game-by-game basis, and I think I've seen improvement in him. So I'd be curious to see, against Calgary's home roster, should be a pretty thorough NHL group. Can he do the things that he needs to do? Because everybody expects his ceiling is much higher than the Hayden Fleury's and Dylan Coghlans of the world. But right here and now, he's going to have to show a different level and a higher level to continue that progress, to show that he's worthy of that roster spot. It's easy for me to see an AHL season for him, or at least half season or what have you, while also acknowledging that I think the ceiling for the player is quite high.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, I've been really impressed with how quickly he seems to be adapting to the North American ice. And Scott Arniel seems very pleased with what he's seen too. In every single game, he's been improving. Would you say, though, I mean, that's the thing. Obviously, a practice is a practice, and we're not exactly sure how things shake out. But today's skate seemed very much like this could be the opening night roster. Would you say Hayden Fleury has the leg up?
I think so, and I think he should, to be honest. Like, if you ask me to list that, and I've done it at The Athletic, I've done roster projections, and when Stanley was hurt, the roster projection for opening night, I have Hayden Fleury in that spot, and I don't think anything's particularly moved me off of that. His NHL experience is real. Certainly he's played some AHL time too, but it is substantial. Metrics-wise, he has kept a relatively clean sheet of ice on the third pair while helping out from time to time as well. I think his body of work before camp is a superior one to the group of competition like Coghlan or Salomonsson, who's still building his pro career over in North America. And I think that his body of work at camp is also the same. So if you're asking me what I think is going to happen and what should happen, both of them are Hayden Fleury on that third pair.
And I think that's a good point to shift into, back to the forward group here and sort of what you think is going to be happening up front throughout the entirety of camp in terms of lines that have stuck together all the way through from day one. Once again, we're looking at a Connor, Scheifele, Vilardi line as the top line for the Jets. I know obviously day one it was out there and everyone freaked out on the internet because that's what the internet does. But then there was a lot of talk about it's day one. We'll wait and see. Maybe it changes. Here we are, one preseason game left, and that appears to be the line of choice for, Scott Arniel in the forward group. Do you think that is what they roll into game one with? And secondly, sort of what do you think the leash is on that, knowing that they have struggled in the past?
I think 100% it's what they roll into game one with. I think it's a line that Winnipeg wants to see for a number of reasons and wants to believe will work for a number of reasons. Certainly we saw metrics-wise, goals against-wise, they did not perform. They did not deliver the results of an above-average first line last year. And on a team that has Stanley Cup aspirations, that has deep playoff aspirations, and certainly didn't win a round, to be clear, they need better results than that. And I think that's clear to everybody. If you're the Winnipeg Jets and you're going back to this look, if you're Scott Arniel and you're going back at it, it's because you think, well, okay, Vilardi's been here for a year now. There's going to be a little bit of an elevated play there. The chemistry will be better. You're going to say to yourself, well, hey, they only played so many games last year, and everybody, well, at least Connor and Vilardi were both, recovering from various injuries and what have you. So you're going to think maybe there's a different level they can get to. I think that line as a trio was +2 at 5-on-5 against the Avalanche as well. So you might go to playoff results and say, hey, actually, that's not the line that killed us. I double checked my numbers on that, but I looked it up a couple of weeks ago, and that's what I think I found. There's also the sort of interpersonal stuff where like Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele love playing together, and that's not going to get broken up anytime soon, to my knowledge. Scheifele also completely values the way that Vilardi plays the game. And everybody, for all those reasons, I think they want that line to work. So for me, that means a long leash. I think they're going to get one. If problems exist elsewhere on the roster, or if they're absolutely getting buried, maybe you look at Nikolai Ehlers to get an elevated position, even if it's Connor Scheifele Ehlers, which we haven't seen a ton of. Because I'll end it here. This is a monologue. If I could do one thing to keep Connor and Scheifele together and make them score a lot of goals, if I could hack one part of the game, it would be Winnipeg's breakouts with the two of them on the ice. They get stuck breaking the puck out of their own zone, which reduces the amount of opportunity they get to play in the offensive zone where they are genuinely great. It syncs their metrics, it syncs their defensive numbers, all that sort of stuff. If you can find a right wing, whether it's Gabriel Vilardi having a career year, whether it's Nikolai Ehlers taking a step forward, whether it's only ever pairing that line with say, Josh Morrissey jumping up the gut to sort of help in transition, there has to be a way to get them out of their zone more often, because I don't see Winnipeg moving off of that group.
Yeah, and I can say with absolute certainty that line is going to be under a microscope for a while. And, I can't, we were talking about it a lot last year. I can't anticipate that's going to be a topic of conversation that's going to be left at least early here in the past. But we're going to move on to a couple other things here. But before we do, we're going to hear a quick word from our sponsor, Betterhelp, and we'll be right back with Murat. This episode of the Level Flight Podcast is sponsored by Betterhelp. What's something you'd love to learn? A new language? How to skate? About a subject you're interested in? Do you make time to learn new things as often as you'd like, or was that lost in childhood? As kids, we have that inherent curiosity to learn new things as we grow, but it isn't something we always hold on to as we shift into adulthood. Therapy can help you to reconnect with your sense of wonder, because your back-to-school era can come at any age. Therapy is something that isn't exclusive to people who have experienced trauma and can be a valuable way to work through your needs that are specific to you. It can help establish healthy habits, coping skills, and allow you to reframe some of your own viewpoints on your experiences to become the best version of yourself that you can be. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. And welcome back into the Level Flight Podcast, episode 101. We are here with Murat of The Athletic. I'm curious to see sort of what you saw as a surprise that's come out of camp. There's been a few names and a few things that have come out, from camp for me that really stuck out. Personally, a name that actually stood out to me, and he hit the waiver wire today, but I was quite impressed with what Simon Lambert has done in his preseason action, and seeing him, develop over the last couple of years as someone who just looked like a farmhand to someone who looked quite good in their minutes in the preseason. Who's someone or something that has come up as a surprise to you during camp?
Yeah, I'll echo Lundmark, to be honest. I mean, over the course of the last year, my esteem of this player has gone up quite a bit. I did used to think, well, geez, he seems to be getting forgotten in the mix. Since he was drafted, we were always talking about the Declan Chisholms, the Ville Heinolas, and, maybe even Jonathan Kovacevic for a little while there. Dylan Sandberg's made the leap. And you never got a lot of hype around Simon Lundmark. He grew into more than just he's grown into more than just a guy who retrieves a puck and makes the first pass. He can defend. He can jump into the play. I think he's going to have a really strong AHL season. It sounds from talking to people like he had a stronger one last year than maybe even I gave him credit for. So it seems like that trajectory is continued growth. I appreciate that for sure. I was almost surprised that we didn't have that Parker Ford, Mikey Esamont type of player emerge this year that was a pain in the ass for other players to play against and just carved out a last-minute audition for himself out of nowhere. I thought Jared Anderson-Dolan got close to it, but maybe not at that same level of hype. I was impressed by his camp, and certainly that shot block, we'll see how he can recover from that. But mostly it's been a veteran show. The guys who are supposed to be good shine against this level of competition. Maybe some of them are getting up to speed, and some of them wishes that the games counted. Like I might say I was surprised by how far away from an NHL player Colby Barlow looked to me, while simultaneously showing an NHL level shot already. I think that, I believe that he drives play at an OHL level, and I thought that heading into camp I'd see him as a quality AHL player. I think that he's probably going to benefit from another really important OHL year, and then maybe have a depending on his development, an AHL year before an NHL one. So like my hype train backed up on that, and that's my honest opinion. But I wish I was sitting here telling you, well, this guy came out of nowhere, and I loved it so much. Like, a few years ago when everybody was down on Josh Morrissey, and I wrote like, listen, guys, his camp was so good for X, Y, and Z reasons. Watch out for a year from him. Like, I wish that was the story I was telling. I don't see it. I can't find that one.
I mean, speaking of surprises, I'm not exactly sure I was surprised per se, but I there was a little bit of a question mark in terms of, I thought that we were going to see a little bit more of Eric Comrie in camp to sort of give him a chance to be like a battler for that backup spot. But it seems since game one, it's always been Hellebuyck Kakkonen as that 1 and 2. Did you anticipate seeing any more of Comrie, or do you always seem like that middleman?
I wondered. So I don't know that I anticipated seeing more of him, but I wondered if we would. I think there's a clear, based on recent history anyway, a clear pecking order of Hellebuyck, Kakkonen, and Comrie, and I think that that's how the depth chart's going to go. I think Comrie is the one most likely to hit waivers and most likely to be the Manitoba Moose veteran star player at that level, but also a great mentor for Thomas Milic, I assume. But then I wondered, because he has such a great relationship with Connor Hellebuyck, and they share so many of agent, trainer, movement coach. There's so many things that they do well together. I wondered. So that might be, a mild surprise to me as well, that we didn't see a little bit more, but I think it's going to be Hellebuyck and Kakkonen. What else do we have? Chaz Lucius, no, I don't think I was expecting a major step forward from him, but he's looked healthy, and I think he's poised ideally for good health and a strong Moose season. Alex Iafallo, I might be seeing good right now there. I wanted to end on a positive note, at least in terms of like camp observations. And I think that that's one where a modest bump back might be available to the player. There was a time when he was an effective guy at any spot in a middle six. I know he went ice cold for long stretches of last season. Should also, like with him, with Neil Pionk, especially with any of the guys that knew Adam Johnson, I would preach taking some grace and some patience with their recovery to full form. There's a lot there. I wonder about an opportunity for Iafallo, not to bounce back into a top six type of player, but to give us a little more to watch and a little more to look at from whatever spot he ends up in on the roster.
And sticking with sort of some wait and sees, obviously he didn't miss that much of camp, but with Cole Perfetti missing, the first couple days of training camp and did not really getting into preseason action until about halfway through. What are you expecting out of him as a start? Are you expecting maybe a little bit of a slower start, or do you think he can get right up to speed? And I say that, literally and figuratively when he's playing alongside Nikolai Ehlers on that second line.
Yeah, I might even be seeing a slower start from him through his, what is it, a pair of preseason games at this stage? Is it two? Where his reads and his scanning are two of his biggest strengths, and I think that those are there. I don't think he missed a ton of time, and in fact, even just talking to him, he says, by a couple days into camp, he felt pretty much up to speed with the team game and all of that sort of stuff. I see tremendous opportunity for him getting what might be top 6 minutes. Even if it's not top 6 minutes, I don't think that they'll fade that line as much as they did. Like if it's Scheifele's line, Lowry's line, and then the Perfetti, Nemestikov, Ehlers line, I don't think they'll fade that trio as much as last year. So that secondary scoring role should be the type of place where you're not getting the top defenseman, you're not getting as heavy of a matchup as Scheifele or maybe even Lowry would get. So maybe there's some offensive growth there. I'm projecting kind of a 50-55 point season from him. Some of that will depend on how much power play time he gets. But I think this is a year where, where a step forward is expected and even likely, even if there is a slow start involved.
Well, I'm curious too, because a lot of where the questions arose last year was a lot of the times when there was a close game, he would be on the bench because he just wasn't someone that Rick Bowness necessarily saw as his late game closeout. In terms of, obviously it's way too early to really tell about where they're going to play guys in leverage situations. But do you see maybe Scott Arniel seeing him as more of a, okay, we'll give you some of these opportunities, let's see if you can run with it? Or are they still going to be cautious?
Well, there's a nice overlap. Now, this could be a whole bunch of coincidence, and probably some of it is. But Perfetti's hot start last year, right, where I think it was 19 points in his first 21 games, and while he didn't maintain that, even by the halfway mark, he looked like he was going to have a really big year. Some of those games, many of them, came during one of Scott Arniel's lengthy stretches as head coach with Rick Bowness's absence. So there's some good vibes, so to speak, there. You've also got Arniel saying that he sees Perfetti as a top 6 player and a power play player, and there's like a little more hype coming from his head coach this year. So that, to me, seems like a little bit more belief. If anything, I'm not expecting those third period benchings during a 1-goal game. That doesn't make sense to me, and it didn't make sense to me then. I don't expect it from Scott Arniel. And Scott Arniel does have his own tendencies, and I think we're going to learn more about them as we get enough games to see patterns and trends. I do think that how he runs his line matches is something he's going to be thinking a lot about. And I think Scheifele is going to have a hard job, and I think Lowry is going to have a hard job. And the next out of the gate might be that Perfetti line, and I believe that should be opportunity to make hay. So we'll see if that's how it goes. And I think that if he gets that opportunity, there's enough underlying numbers and enough trends there and enough vision in the player to say that he'll produce with it.
I think that's definitely going to be, similar to the top line. That second line, their minutes, their usage, I think that's going to be a storyline that we're going to talk about, fairly well into the season before we sort of get a read on what's happening. We're going to, get a couple more things after the break here, but we're going to hear from DraftKings quickly, and we'll be right back to wrap things up, look more at the season, what's coming next, and we'll get that all wrapped up for you. So we're going to hear from DraftKings, and we'll be right back. TD, Tutty, taking it to the house. Whatever you call a touchdown, they matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
And welcome back into the Level Flight podcast. Thanks again to DraftKings for sponsoring this episode. We are right near the end of training camp. There's, only a few practices and one game left. Rosters have to be finalized by Sunday. What's a storyline that we've, maybe not talked about too much that you're kind of keeping an eye on, or has everything kind of just been settled for the most part?
Well, I think it is getting a lot of press, but the power play is, in my mind, I am expecting just a slight regression from Winnipeg's defense this year. Call that the Brendan Dillon effect, call that going a full year, or at least leaning harder into that Connor Scheifele Vilardi offense to see what's happening there. I think that there's reasons to believe that Winnipeg's not going to be the literal best team in terms of goals against this season. So if there's a modest bump back there, I'm imagining that the power play is going to generate enough goal differential to make up for it, or at least to steal games on certain nights. But honestly, Brian, we've talked a lot about that. I talked about that earlier. I think there's a lot of attention going that way. Gabriel Vilardi sometimes gets lost in the discussion, but even then, I know that Connor's been talking about him. I think that Connor wrote about him at Illegal Curve recently as well. And that's a situation where you hope the player has enough good health to take advantage of, high-end reads, high-end puck protection, decision-making in a phone booth. When he was part of Winnipeg's power play, even last year when they had fewer ideas and fewer options, he made that thing hum. And I think that there's room for plenty of growth in his game. Sometimes we forget, you asked me about standouts, and I talked about, here's where I think Brad Lambert and Nikita Chibrikov are at, or you could talk about Cole Perfetti's likelihood for growth or what have you. Sometimes we forget that development happens in the mid-20s too, even if a lot of it happens before that. So Gabriel Vilardi is one to watch. The Nikolai Ehlers story and his future, I think, is one to watch. This first unit power play opportunity that he's got, especially with as much movement into the middle as he gets, the goal he scored as an example of him using his shot to take advantage of the passing between Scheifele and Vilardi, he's likely headed towards an uptick in points, a substantial one given the power play opportunity. He could even be a slightly worse 5-on-5 player this year. The power play is going to make him bank. And so now you're wondering, does that mean he's part of the Jets' long-term plans? Is there some attempt at, an 11th hour long-term extension? I'm not sure. I know the Jets want to pack a whole lot of money and keep that in reserve for when Kyle Connor is up. He's a big priority for the organization. What does this do to Nikolai Ehlers' value? Does he stick in that power play spot? Is he a long-term Jet or not? Which I think everything's up in the air right now, or at least every possibility is a possibility right now. And I think that's a storyline that, under the new coach banner, maybe we've forgotten to talk about, hey, there's a very good player among many others who are pending UFAs whose future is uncertain in Winnipeg.
Yeah, and I mean, a storyline too that I've found has been very quickly, put by the wayside is because there's been so many injuries below him. I feel like people have kind of pushed aside the fact that Dylan Sandberg is going to be a full-time top 4 defenseman this year. And, he is someone who he stepped in, every once in a while for Brendan Dillon, whether it was for injury or suspension, and he's looked good in that time. But, what do you think we should expect out of Dylan Sandberg, especially, with him playing with someone like Neil Pionk, who does jump into the play a lot, and there has been, a little bit of chaos at times in his game. How does someone like Sandberg, deal with that when he's been playing in more sheltered roles over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think that the partner is a good one to consider, and the situation is a good one to consider. I think expectations for Dylan Sandberg should be quality and inconsistency. I believe in the player to step into a top 4 role in the long term, but the leap from the third pair to the second pair, it's it's an even bigger leap, I think, in terms of quality of competition than second pair to first pair. Like, this is one of the, in terms of what coaches are able to do to protect players or not protect players in terms of their matchups, this is a substantial jump. So Samberg, who I think of as a quality defender, good positionally, doesn't get beat by losing track of coverage or what have you. I think he's a good scanner and a good reader of the play. Every now and again, even in his career so far, there's been some puck handling mishaps. There's been a giveaway here or there. Things happen even while he's playing well in his role. Now his role's gotten a lot harder. I also think of some players as capable of creating structure and creating order even when there's chaos. They're so good and they're so established that they can do that. And others whose games suddenly look a whole lot better if there's order around them. I thought of Brendan Dillon that way. I don't think Brendan Dillon saved Winnipeg's defense when he showed up, but once that structure improved, once the Rick Bowness impact arrived and the team was playing a better overall version of defense, I thought Brendan Dillon went from looking like, a maybe top 4 guy to an excellent top 4 guy. And I think that Samberg is a player who I wouldn't expect to create structure. If Neil Pionk struggles this season, I think it's going to make Samberg's life difficult in a way that he might not be able to fix all on his own. If Neil Pionk has a great season where he's tracking really well, he's aggressive at the line, he's ending plays early, I think Samberg, how he's going to look to us as the exact same guy is going to be all the better for that. So that's long-winded and maybe a little bit like airy in terms of a description. I think that quality and inconsistency would be the 2 hallmarks of my expectations.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be. I mean, especially too with there being so much flux in the bottom 2 pairings there, and there could be some movement in there as well. But that defensive group is going to be under a lot of microscopes this year, especially after last season's defensive sort of structure and success that they found. Just to kind of shift into the last little bit here going into the season, what are you expecting out of that final preseason game on Friday?
A veteran lineup, maybe a little more attention to detail. There were moments last night where some of us in press row were wondering, like, is Josh Morrissey, there's plays in traffic where he was Josh Morrissey, like absolutely at his best. But just to use him as an example, there were moments during the second period when the whole team looked a little sluggish, where we were like, okay, is he waiting to dial things up a little bit? And I think by the last preseason game, you want to be pretty darn close to your game 1 type of level of play. So whether it's him, who I'm picking on as an example, or the Scheifele's, Vilardis, Connors, Elias', Dylan DeMello's of the group. Dylan DeMello actually got walked in the neutral zone last night, and there's just little moments that made a quality Jets roster look for a while like they were 50-50 with an AHL level Calgary lineup, and you want to see that go away by the last preseason game. If there are young players that draw in, if Lambert gets another game, if Salomonsson gets another game, I want to see them make noise before the third period, just to go out on the best possible note and make that decision as tough as possible.
Yeah, I'm anticipating, as you said, like a fairly NHL lineup, and then maybe that last ditch effort for some of these, guys maybe on the bubble. Thank you so much for joining us for our bit of a season preview here. Before I let you go though, what are you either working on or what came out recently that you want people to check out?
I want people to read our Josh Morrissey one-on-one that went up this morning. So it's Thursday, and we have the full analytical Jets preview that Dom and Shayna put together. That's live. We have a whole bunch of other league-wide content that's live. And in the middle of all this today, I've got this Josh Morrissey one-on-one up. And I think that Morrissey's career trajectory is one of the most interesting things in Winnipeg Jets modern-day history. Shows up as a top 4 ready guy, takes some steps back during that chaos year where Buffalo's gone. During 2021, he looked like he was outright struggling. And then career year, another career year. He doubles his point production. And then after hitting 76 points, he hit 69 points with a markedly improved defensive game. And so we went into all of that. asked him for his sort of philosophy about how he's approached all of this, what he would say to other players looking to embody his path or follow in his footsteps. And I think that Josh Morrissey is one of the most fascinating people to sort of have those inside baseball conversations with. And I hope that people find that when they read it as well. So that's one that I'm leaning into. If you're asking me what I want people to read, let's point at that Josh Morrissey story.
Yeah, definitely go and check that out. I mean, I'm sure everyone does already if you're, watching us, but if you haven't yet, go follow Murat on Twitter at WPG Murat. Thanks again for coming on. We always appreciate you coming on. At this point, you're, a regular guest. So, well, I'm sure we'll have you on later, in the season, maybe closer to the All-Star break to kind of figure out what's going on in the first half. But thanks again. Check us out on social media at Level Flight WPG. Everything about the episodes and upcoming episodes. Maybe you missed last episode where we sort of outlined a new schedule. Check it out there, all on our socials. We will see you next time for episode 102. Have a good day, everyone.